There is a lot happening in the land of lending at the moment. The number one issue that's facing Australians is the cost of living. The second one, and this came out in the AFR, is housing affordability and the housing crisis that we have at the moment. Housing target was 1.2 million. Labor government pledged to build 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade. The trajectory that we're on at the moment is less than 1 million. So we've got a shortfall there already.
So with housing affordability, the way to ease the pressure is by increasing supply. But the government's saying that they can't meet the targets that they've set to increase the supply. We've got borrowing power increasing off the back of rates coming down, confidence increasing. You put two and two together, there's no prices just typically will just continue to rise.
Prices will go up.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. So for us, this is a big day in finance land, finance nerds.
Woohoo!
This is a big day. Anyone with a mortgage will be cheering as well. I can definitely feel our wallet has got a little bit thicker this afternoon. But we wanted to unpack what's going on in the market, because when I started doing some research for today, there is a lot happening in the land of lending at the moment. I think a lot of this is politically driven. I'm not going to weigh into the politics of this at all. But what I'm going to say is, as we approach the election, the number one issue that's facing Australians is the cost of living. The second one, and this came out in the AFR, is housing affordability and the housing crisis that we have at the moment. So this is not going away. In fact, watch this space, because as we roll closer to the election, I dare say we're going to see a lot more policies and a lot more ideas get thrown around. We're going to unpack all that today. I've got the dream team with me here. Bernie, welcome.
Thank you, Aaron.
Damien.
Thanks, Aaron.
Nate.
Thanks, Aaron.
Nate, I call Nate my right hand, and you're literally sitting on my right hand side, mate. So thank you very much for joining us. We're in for an absolutely cracking episode. So strap yourself in. I've got a whole raft of pages of information here, like we always do. We always do a lot of deep work. We like to be prepared as well, because if you're giving us your time, we want to return serve by giving you as much knowledge, insights as we possibly can. So let's just start with the RBA decision. I mean, quick show of hands. Who thought we were going to have a rate cut today? Yep. I mean, I feel like we had this sentiment. I think not that we're old hands at this, but I think we've been around long enough to know that when we start to see the media really beat this up, we almost feel like there's some writing on the wall here.
Yeah, I didn't think personally until like the media kept going on about it.
Yeah, it really becomes like a bit of a tell.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't been tapping into the media this last month, but I have been saying for a long time now, and this is a bit more of the political agenda, that Labor needed a rate cut before they go to call this election. Cost of living, like you've mentioned, AC, is a massive issue for Aussies, and there's no way they could have called this election not having done something to help.
Yes, let's see. I mean, let's see what it does. I mean, not that we're getting it political. We look at the polls as the indicator or the litmus test for the heartbeat of Australia. But I dare say Australians will be feeling a little bit. They're breathing easier. It's a welcome relief. I mean, for the last, 3 years, everyone's been an inflation expert. I mean, we've got to know about trimmed and mean inflation and underlying inflation, stuff that meant nothing to people about 3 years ago has become vernacular at most household dinner tables as well. So when we talk about inflation, seeing at what is it, the target inflation, 3.2%, that was the underlying inflation. They're targeting that 2 to 3%. I think Mark Boris said it best when I was watching one of his videos. He's like, well done to Australians. He's like, well done to you, the consumer, the Australian, who has reined in spending for the last few years. They've found it tougher. The cost of everything has gone up. It doesn't mean the cost of things are going to go down. It just means that we're not going to see that heavy...
Those rapid increases.
It'll be, these will still be $15 in the city, that's for sure.
Yeah, prices don't go down, but they just go up slower.
That's what pegging back that inflation figure is. So households have really reined in spending. I mean, we see it. We see it as a team. Clients that went on really nice holidays a few years ago, they started to drop back a little bit. They got a little bit more modest. So I looked at travel as one of the big signs that got peaked back. Everyone spoke about there was less in the shopping basket or the trolley. Households really looked at their budgets. And I called
You
it.
speak to parents, they're cutting back on kids' activities.
We see it from a parent's perspective.
Absolutely, they're being a little bit more selective about that. So I would say, Mark Boris is saying well done to Australians, but I would say well done to all of those young families out there, those families that really are carrying a lot of that burden of the high mortgages and a lot of the kids' expenses. We've really carried, and I say we because Aaron and I are in this boat, we've carried a load the last couple of years. Yeah. And I feel like we've just summited this hill and I can just start to see the downward slope and it's looking nice.
It's looking nice, but we've got used to a little bit of pain.
Yeah.
Embrace that. Whatever you're doing, don't relax. Don't relax your spending. Keep that tight budget. We're going to talk through how much extra will go into your bank account with these reductions in rates. But I'm like, this is where it's going to start to then separate the good from great. The people that are going to be disciplined around keeping that money smarts and money habits that they had during the hard times. Now you've got to keep those habits in the good times as well. So I don't want to be a downer, a wet blanket on this, but just to say, hey, look, if you have discipline, keep the discipline as well. Okay. So when I look back, again, 73% of economists were expecting a rate cut. So I feel like that number even went higher according to the AFR as well. The RBA doesn't meet in January, so that's another change that's come through. Typically, they used to meet 11 times a year. They've changed that as well. So we'll include in the notes kind of when you'll see the RBA meeting. And now they actually release some more information as well, whereas they just used to go with an announcement. This is just a statement that came out straight off the website, so I'll grab that as well. But they typically will do more media to talk through some Q&A, which I think is really important that we want to hear from definitely the RBA and the decisions that get made. So why don't we start with, okay, what does this mean for mortgage holders? I'm going to throw to you, Bernie. So if I've got a mortgage, what can I expect to see some relief in my mortgage repayments?
Yeah, for sure. So say your mortgage is $600,000, your repayments can expect to decrease by about $92 a month. If your mortgage is $750,000, expect that to reduce by $115 a month. And if you got $1 million mortgage, expect your repayments to reduce by $154 a month. So it is a welcome change. It is still small though. Like I think when you hear 0.25, you're cheering. But then when you look at those numbers, I mean, $154, I could spend that at a grocery shop. So
is that a month? Sorry.
That's a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not.
It just means steaks back on the menu the extra week.
Yeah, and then you get a steak or some steak and prawns, as we like to say in our house. But I think there's something to be mindful of. Not all banks will actually automatically reduce your repayments. So if you are in desperate need of that extra cash in bank, make sure you call your bank. One, make sure that they've passed on the rate cut, find out what date that is. And then two, find out if they have actually reduced your actual repayments, because some banks keep your repayments the same. So you're paying off still that little bit extra every month, which might be good. But if that cash flow is required for your household, make sure you give them a call and double check.
Great. Thank you, Rach. And as we get more information coming through to us, that's literally like top hit of monitor. We understand CBA has just announced their rates.
Correct. As of 28th of Feb, they're dropping all variable rates by 0.25. They've also announced a range of fixed. Westpac 5 minutes later also came out with the same.
Yeah.
For March 4th. That is.
Have they told us when they'll put the rate cuts in place?
Yeah. So Feb 28th for CBA, Westpac March 4th.
So was that 10 days time?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Oh, so that's pretty quick. I'm surprised.
Now, that's for new lending. I'm assuming it's the same for existing customers if you've already got a loan with them. But we'll wait.
Watch this
to find. Yeah.
So we're going to try and give as much information that comes at hand. But you start to see it a bit sporadic. Some banks will announce it now. Some banks will sit back waiting. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that CBA was the first to move. Mm-hmm. Normally they sit back and wait. I could say that having worked in the comms team at CBA on some of these in the past, we sit back and wait and see who moves first. It's a bit like those old cowboy movies with the gun.
Mm.
The shoot off.
Yeah, and everyone's playing a bit of cat and mouse. But I think they needed it from a little bit of reputation. I saw an interview with Matt Common again talking about, will they pass it on? I think the banks were under a lot of pressure, particularly as they posted record profits. What are we talking? $5 billion?
$5 billion. They needed to pass this rate cut on, ladies and gentlemen.
And that's what we like to think. We like to keep them pretty honest as brokers. And it's something that we do in terms of the post-settlement support, managing all our clients' ongoing loans as we would our own. So I think if you are an existing client, just know that we will continue to reprice loans as soon as possible. The second is I think just keep an eye out for what your current bank is doing. They usually announce that through internet banking as well, but do double check their media socials as well. So let's crack on. So we've got rate cuts at the moment. Now, have we gone through what we think the rest of the banks are going to do this year? What's their prediction around rate cuts?
Yeah, so the big four have come out with their predictions for the year. So CBA and Westpac are both saying that there are going to be 4 rate cuts this year. ANZ predicts 2 and NAB is actually saying 5. So across the scope, it's pretty varied from 5 to 2, but the consensus, as you can see, is
There's at least one more.
At least one more.
Yeah. It's like we said, this is a win for Australians, especially mortgage holders. I did some research though, and credit card interest rates. It's amazing. You watch this; they don't change.
No,
they're over 20%. So I thought I'd just slide it in here because you'll hear me talk about this all the time. You got a credit card and you use it, give yourself a little uppercut. If you're paying interest, give yourself a massive uppercut. There's no reason you should be paying interest on credit cards. That's a death. That's a death product. Banks are making far too much money. And because we've got a rate cut, those rates don't drop on credit cards. You watch that, you look at a credit card interest rate chart, and I'll include this in the notes as well. They do not drop. So my little reminder to anyone on credit cards, and we'll talk to what borrowing capacity levers to pull as well. They murder borrowing capacity. And I had a client the other day going, we've listened to your podcast. We know what you think about credit cards, but can we keep it? I was like, absolutely not. Cut it up and let's move on. So you know where I stand and I've conviction around that as well. But now I want to throw to you and say, okay, let's play this out. I think I gave you a couple of scenarios just to quickly run through. So let's go. What does this rate cut mean for potential buyers? Please.
Perfect. So in terms of borrowing capacity, let's say single applicant, 100K income.
Yep.
Bear with.
Yep. And then we'll go into the HEX because this is probably another political agenda that's going through at the moment.
Yeah. So the effect on borrowing capacity, 100K single applicant, 0.25% decrease will increase your borrowing capacity by about 15K.
15K.
Yeah.
Okay. Correct. So just know that every rate cut, 15K is going back into your borrowing capacity. Now, I think you ran some numbers as well, Damien.
Yeah, I think back of the envelope, so high level, is every percentage drop in rates, you'll get about half your income back in borrowing. So 100K salary, 1% drop in rates, you get 50K back in borrowing. Yeah. Thereabouts.
So we times that. So we take that 100K, 4 times 15. So people will be doing the math.
60.
60K.
50, 60.
50,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it makes
sense.
guys back in the envelope. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So if you try and do the math here and you go, right, 1%. So on 100K, 1%. So if we get to where CBA say I'm getting full rate cuts.
Yeah, which would be 1%.
You're going to get somewhere between a $50,000 to $60,000 increase in your borrowing capacity.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a single high 100K income earner, that's what that does, which is interesting because
I would say it's not that much. I don't think it's definitely an increase to borrowing,
60K,
but it's not the decrease.
Can I jump in? So typically it's not a single applicant anymore. It's two applicants. So if we've got, throwing some numbers at you guys, 250,000 is an income.
Yeah, you'd have 125 an increase in borrowing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thereabouts, like half the income.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I think that's definitely strong.
Yes.
But it's not what we saw wiped out from the 4.25% of increases.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I think that's probably where I get to it. It's like it's not insignificant.
Yes.
But when during COVID and rates were at 2%, yeah, we're not going to get down to that level ever again.
Yeah, and is it because in servicing calcs, banks have factored in higher cost of living, like higher living expenses? Is that why we're not seeing such a massive increase in borrowing power?
Definitely cost of living. Like HEM goes up twice a year, so the bank will assign living expenses as per your income.
Which, I mean, they've gone up recently, right?
Yeah, they go up twice a year.
Yeah.
It's like the cigarette tax twice a year. So you'll obviously see your living expenses increase year on year, just in the bank's calc.
Yeah.
But I just think 1%, I think people who borrowed during COVID, they're like, okay, when can I get back to that level? I don't think you'll get back to that level. So just be aware of that.
I mean, that was an anomaly. We're at 0.1% as a cash rate. Like,
record.
That's an anomaly. And I did some research. CoreLogic has put a really good report out. Which housing markets get the biggest boost from rate cuts?
Yeah, let me read.
Have a look through that, because there's a lot of data.
One market in here, number second, Sutherland, 19%, 1% rate cut. Fantastic.
So hang on. So you're getting a 19% increase in property values
from a 1% reduction. That's what CoreLogic is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the median price goes to 1.5. So you work this out and go, right, a 1% rate cut will accelerate that market by 19%.
Yeah.
A 1% rate cut will increase your borrowing capacity. Will it keep up? And that's kind of my initial thoughts, which is, I reckon the property price acceleration will outpace people's...
Which is where I'm like, the borrowing power will increase, but will increase at the rate that the housing market will, just on the back of confidence. Confidence drives prices.
Let's talk about sentiment, because we had this the first week in January. We came back, and this is our humble little brokerage, to a stacked calendar of people just reaching out. I had people reaching out from emails and strategies that we put out in 2023. So, mate, we want to get back on top of this. So we felt that sentiment was there from the start of the year. People sat back in 2024, waiting for the right time to buy, realized that waiting wasn't the strategy that was serving them, come back in the new year, almost anticipating this rate cut. And then we had people over the weekend buying, go, I'll put it again before this next rate cut comes in. And we could feel this anticipation in the air going. They knew it was going to happen at some point, whether it was February, March, whenever, but it was on the cards that this was almost a bankable rate cut.
The energy and the confidence is up, and people are motivated to act. There is no sitting and waiting anymore, I would say.
Correct.
And I think what the RBA has mentioned is, like, wages have been increasing at a fairly high rate. So, yeah, people have money.
Yeah.
If you've been sitting around just waiting, maybe you're just a little bit skeptical, hey, if rates keep going up, I don't want to be involved in that.
Yep.
But now that everyone, consensus is that they're on the way down.
Yeah.
People who are sitting on the sidelines are ready to jump in.
I mean, it says it here in the minutes today, wage pressures have eased a little bit more than expected. So they're seeing that data come through, and they operate on lag data. I mean, we see it generally. A lot of our clients have got pay rises, increases. A lot of our clients are on substantial income figures as well. So again, it's a message that I'll say over and over again. If waiting is not a strategy that will serve you by what you can, when you can, where you can, you get into the market, because you cannot outpace the ability to save while properties continue to increase. And everything that I've got here is all talking about changing lending and moving the dial from a lending perspective. That's when you see price growth. When you move lending and people's ability to borrow goes up, it just pushes house price up, because we know the supply side is not meeting demand. In fact, I'll touch on that for a second. So the what have we got? Housing target was 1.2 million.
So the government,
Labor government pledged to build 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade. The trajectory that we're on at the moment is less than 1 million. So we've got a shortfall there already. So we don't have enough supply coming through the pipeline to soak up the current demand. You add more demand into the mix, because I can tell you right now, my borrowing capacity's gone up. I'm going to buy properties. My yield is going to get better because my repayments have gone down a little bit more as well. This is a competition. I'm not saying against other people. It's just saying there's a competition. If you want to buy more properties and improve your financial position, the deck is now getting stacked in your favor. And now it's a matter of who will take action, who'll pull the trigger, and jump in as well, because we can see it's starting to really turn up the dial as well.
So they speak about, the government, especially housing unaffordability, right? It's what cost of living. What are the two big?
Number one is cost of living. Second is housing
affordability. Yeah. So with housing affordability, the way to ease the pressure is by increasing supply. But the government's saying that they can't meet the targets that they've set to increase the supply.
Yeah.
We've got borrowing power increasing off the back of rates coming down.
Confidence increasing.
You put two and two together. There's no prices, just typically will just continue to rise.
Prices will go up.
Yeah.
Rents have stabilized, for example. So people that are renting Now, I did the maths yesterday with someone. They were looking to rent. I was like, no, your mortgage repayments are equivalent to your rent right now. Wait till rates come down. It doesn't make sense to rent. So the rent investor model even gets challenged to a certain degree, going, how we can get into our own home. We then have equity to go and buy an investment property. I feel like the rent investing model at this point this year will almost get challenged a little bit, going, but maybe we want the security stability of buying our own home.
Yeah, depending on the market.
Some people.
Yeah, depending on the market.
If you can market,
yes.
I think if you marketed demographic, the rent investing model will suit people aged in their 20s.
Yes.
To help them get the leg up to get their own rock in their 30s.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're all at. And rent investing probably just means living at home rent free.
Awesome.
If we can be serious.
Awesome. So, Nate, as we continue to go on, what have we got? Say, couples, for example, take double incomes, and how does that kind of move the needle?
With the rate drop?
Yep.
Let's have a look. So let's assume 100K each or 200K combined for the household.
Yeah, let's go with that. So we know that, a lot of clients that we have are sitting above that income.
Probably.
Yeah. But we're doing this based on
median's 100K now, or in Sydney anyway.
Yeah,
is that 100K?
No,
average.
Yeah, average.
So the effect on a couple is about 20K for a 0.25% drop.
Okay. So we've got 15K for a single, 20 odd K for a
correct. Yeah.
Moves the needle a little bit more as a couple as well.
Definitely.
Cool. The other big one here, and that's while you're doing that, adding HEX debts as well. Now, there is, again, a political discussion around HEX to be excluded from borrowing capacity. You've heard me as well. HEX is probably the number one killer for a lot of young aspirational homeowners or investors. We add in a 50, how much do we see, Nate? Like 50, 60 grand HEX debt sometimes.
I reckon that's probably the average.
I reckon, yeah.
I see some big ones like 90K plus.
Especially people going to do postgrad.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Masters, yeah.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because what we see is when someone's finally left uni, got that first fairly good professional salary of over 100K, they're dragging a 50K debt around,
lugging it around,
and their repayments are linked to their income, and their repayments only keep going up as their income goes up.
Correct.
Their borrowing just gets smashed.
Hey, great. It's Look, politics aside, let's go to numbers because I'll get a bee in my bonnet the more we keep talking about. And they're talking about this you got to be earning at least $54,000. Every graduate that I see is earning $54,000.
I earned that as a graduate 10 years ago when I came. Yeah.
So everyone's paying HEX. So to me, you've got to factor that into your borrowing capacity. Now, Nate, what does that do if we take that out of someone's borrowing capacity?
Awesome. So 70K income, you're looking at about 18K borrowing capacity increase.
Wow. So that helps more than the rate cut.
0.25% rate cut, correct.
And that's only 70K where your repayments really are now at 100K is 55K.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where you see that ramp up as your repayments go up.
If we overlay the two together, you take a rate cut and the exclusion of HEX, a first-time buyer market's going to heat up.
And easily by 50K plus.
And the exclusion of HEX is coming from a potential policy from the government, right? Where it's, if they can see that within a period of time you're going to pay it out, they'll remove it from your serviceability calculations. Is that right?
Well, they're saying they're telling the banks to exclude it from servicing.
Yeah.
Which this is a throwback because when we started, you didn't have to include HEX.
No.
We didn't include. So going back 10 years ago, we never included HEX. We didn't know what people's. This is a recent change. I've seen in the last 3-4 years, we've seen this come in and start to affect people's borrowing.
Yeah.
So we're just going back to how it was anyway.
Which is very rare that you see lending standards get lax. I always feel like they get a little bit tighter. They get a little more stringent, a little bit more sophisticated, for example. It's very rare to see it go back, but it's very clear that the government only has a few levers to pull. There's supply, there's demand, and sitting below demand is how do you move the needle for people, particularly borrowing capacities, young first-home buyers trying to get into the market, exclude HEX.
But this is again contrary because government's meant to be supplying more. We're falling short on that supply, yet they're pulling a lever to increase
demand.
Yeah. But our supply is short. It doesn't add up.
The math ain't mathin', I will. This is one of the questions we're angling to get someone that is in politics to come on. So these are some of the questions that we will be tabling to go. take us through some of the government policies and how we approach this as well. So watch your space.
Can't wait to hear the political response on that.
And then we talked about super. So you get a contribution, you pull out 50K as super. I mean, a young Australian, we see it. They've probably got maybe up to 50K in super, so be able to pull that out. I think I'll leave a little bit left over from what I'm seeing and reading. But I will come back to this point. If you're waiting for the government to give you a leg up to get into your home, don't. Yeah, so people will be sitting back waiting for the exclusion effects, for example, waiting to pull out super. You can wait, but just know you'll be swimming with sharks at that time, because now it's all things equal. Everyone's got the same leg up as you. And the only thing that's going to increase is the house prices. I remember when they did the first home buyer grants when my older brother bought, it was like 21,000 or 14,000, then went to 7,000. The second they announced that overnight, bang, those prices went up by 21,000 and 14,000, right? Like, it just, that the market factors that in, especially when they're pitching to first home buyers at certain price points. We see it. The second that it just goes over that price point, they've cut out first home buyers.
Do you remember that New South Wales had a land tax scheme? So land tax instead of stamp duty.
Yeah.
And the cap was 1.5 million.
Yes.
And I had clients bidding for properties in the eastern suburbs. They'd say to the agent 1.5. The agent said they've already got 1.5. And knowing that they can't go $1 over that amount.
Yeah.
So people will push that limit.
That hard stuff.
Hearing, so this is the coalition's policy to draw money out from super for a deposit.
Yeah.
It just seems wild to me, because that would essentially mean you could pull super out. You could then go and use the first home guarantee scheme, where it's a 5% deposit, no LMI, to go and buy a property. So you need no money saved at all if you could combine those two policies to go and buy it. It's ridiculous to think that that's not going to have an extreme impact on the housing market. And the impact is up.
And take, for example, we've done this a couple of times with clients where they can buy interstate because their role lets them work from home.
Yeah.
So they can go and buy this property interstate at a price point, get in there, renovate the property, do whatever they can to improve the value, live in it for 6 or 12 months, whatever the requirement is, and then move back. And it's like they bought their first property, no stamp duty, 5%, no LMI, for example, get into a growth asset. So maybe do some
guidelines, tick all the boxes.
Great.
Yeah.
There's no way that's not off the cards for a lot of aspiring first-home buyers. So again, if you're sitting on the outer, you don't have access to the banker, mum and dad. I know we've got a lot of first-home buyers that are super, super creative, right? Always trying to push the boundaries. Hey mate, scratch this itch. And if your role allows you to work remotely, this could be one way that you stack the deck in your favour.
Yeah. Take that 6 to 12 months, maybe move into state, make that happen, and you could renovate, like you said, cosmetic renos, sell, and then
get it revalued.
And then you're ready to go again.
You got to rent. You might as well move into it. The rent on that price property would be equivalent to what you're paying. You might even get a drop in like lifestyle costs as well, mate, because if you move somewhere regional, I'll tell you now, there ain't no Uber Eats down the south coast where we are. So you've got to be organised. You'll save yourself a bucket load of money. But the next one here, again, political, that's come out, temporary residents will be barred from buying existing properties for at least the next couple of years. This is building off the fact that overseas investors have been barred from buying existing homes for some time as well. Now,
so it's temporary residents. What's the difference between that and foreign investors?
So temporary residents on a visa.
Oh, so like short time.
A skilled worker.
Visa, no PR.
Yeah,
yes,
not PR.
Oh, right.
We're going to get clarity on this as well. But yeah, this is just pulling a couple of headlines real quick.
Yeah.
Now, when we do the numbers, the real estate transactions, there was 5,300 in 2022 to 2023, according to the ATO. And 34% were for existing homes as well. So
I think that's a beat up as well.
It's a very small,
because they already get charged the FIRB, and then the extra stamp duty as well. There's already enough sort of roadblocks of people who I speak to temporary residents. I tell them, no, you're up for this amount. They quickly don't return my phone call. So, yeah.
And that was doing a crackdown. Remember they were cracking down on they were going through old clients that bought on visas years ago and trying to get stamp duty as well. So I think it's a bit of a show just to go where we're not letting foreign investors buy in Australia. Again, maybe it's political, maybe it's a good policy.
I mean, they need to be seen to be doing something right. When your number 2 issues are cost of living and housing affordability, you need to show that you're doing something.
Great. And then if we kind of turn our eye to some of the recent data that are pulled out with CoreLogic, they put out their February chart pack, which contains some gold in there as well. Again, if you want to talk about sentiment and confidence in the market, seeing particularly regionals, and I felt like some people say regionals had their day after COVID, but they actually outpaced the metro and capital cities. So 3/4 of regional suburbs across Australia saw an increase. That's 3/4 of regional suburbs outpaced the capital cities. Yeah. In contrast, half of the capital city suburbs reported a quarterly fall. Yeah. And then 3 and 4 suburbs across cities saw a decline in value over the last 3 months to Jan, while 9 out of 10 suburbs in Melbourne recorded quarterly declines. Now, you speak to someone like a Simon Pressey's, like they always report on Sydney and Melbourne. I mean, that's fair, they always do. But when you overlay that with the suburb data across regional Australia versus capital cities, you can start to see that regionals have got a bit of a groundswell. I really feel like there's an upgrader movement that's starting to happen in regions. Like take Sydney, for example, Newcastle, Central Coast, South Coast, Bowral, Shoalhaven, for example. It's still becoming attractive for a lot of people that are seeking a lifestyle priced out of Sydney, even with these increases in borrowing capacity, even with the reduction in rates, for example. They still won't be happy buying a shoebox in Sydney. They want a freestanding house. And the only way to do that is to move to outer ring suburbs.
And to sort of add on to if there's going to be continued growth in these areas, a lot of these first home buyer policies that are already in place and potentially being released target homes in these areas because there's always price caps on them. And I rarely get a Sydney property that fits the first home buyer policy.
We don't ever do first home buyer stuff.
And you've got to buy a unit in Sydney to get a stamp duty discount.
Yeah.
You know,
and
so
no one's happy with the one better. I'm going to be open with everyone. They're going, that's not a great asset. For example, if I'm going to get a return on my cash, cash on cash return, they're going to say becoming a rent investor.
Or if, especially young family, they're like, well, there's no livability here past, one kid.
Right, correct.
So these markets potentially will continue to grow, especially we keep seeing this first home buyer, what they would call relief, but will put a pressure on prices in these areas.
And I think it's something more than just the finances of it. I think there's also, not for all, but a lot of people looking at quality of life and looking at the lives that they live in these capital cities and going, hey, I'm stuck in this grind, traffic, running around here, there, everywhere. Hey, this is not the life I saw for my family or for us as a couple, or me as a person. And I think people are starting to be more open to exploring those alternative options, which is really encouraging because I think you don't need to be on that race if you don't need to be.
Yeah. And look, the Great Australian Dream, I think it's evolved and changed. I still think the dream is alive for people to have a freestanding home.
That is a massive dream for Aussies. I feel like that is
particularly moving to a family stage. I think when you're a younger couple, double income, no kids, apartment living, townhouses in a city, that makes absolute sense. Now, we've got a lot of clients that do live in a city with family, kids, no qualms. That happens, but it gets to a point where they're going to run out of room. And the only way is either to go up or renovate, which becomes particularly expensive, or move out as well.
Adding on to your point, Bernie, I think that the livability in these areas, however, regardless if you're in a freestanding house, this is talking about capital cities, is going away because they're earmarking so many development sites for apartments. You do not see the infrastructure to match what they're planning to build, especially with the roads.
With the roads, and that's traffic, right?
Which is traffic, which adds on to the pressure of parking.
Commuting gets
the cost of everything because then, all right, parking's an issue. Let's pay for parking now. So, even in a freestanding home in Sydney, I feel like people are going to get a little bit, fatigued by it.
Well said. And I'm going to come back to the point earlier that we talked about, like the sentiment and confidence in the market. Clearance rates are up. So clearance rates, and look, take these clearance rates with a grain of salt because I certainly do. There's ways that they can be manipulated. But when you take 1,670 homes for the previous week, and then we were at 1,972 properties went for auction last week, that's a significant, I think I worked out it was about 15% increase. So you can start to see, obviously it's a time in the year, return to school, things start to go back to normal. So we'll start to see this number trend upwards as well. But it's clearance rates that have had a higher trend as well. compared to this time last year. So to me, what it is, the market is very sentiment driven. I've said this to a few people, maybe listening as well. As mortgage brokers, I feel like we've got the best seat in the house, and a lot of mortgage brokers don't actually realize it. Let me explain. We get to see where clients are buying. Maybe they're buying through BAs, for example. We get to see what the property was listed for and what it sold for before that becomes public information. We get to see days on market. We get to see sellers who are looking to sell and what their campaigners look like and where they've ended up with as well. We get to see professional investors, how they've built their portfolio. We get to see first-time investors, how they're starting out. We get to see investors who have fallen off the wagon, for example, and really got bad advice, and now we're trying to get them back on the wagon too. We get to see a lot of self-employed clients really moving into commercial. So this year, the buzzword is commercial. 2024, the buzzword was trusts. The year before that,
SMSFs maybe.
SMSFs. The year before that was granny flats or renos and
cashback.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Cashback. And then before that, we had like granny flats and renos. The renos are far too expensive. The granny flats are far too expensive to do at the moment.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of theme, and that's why when we're looking at the year ahead, we kind of generally know what the flavour of the year is looking like. And commercial, to me, seems to be the big one as well. So again, if you're one of a few camps of people just starting out in your journey and you really wanted to get that roadmap going for you, what can I do? What's possible? Maybe you've got one property under your belt and you want to strip the equity and go again, then reach out. I know people reach out, they drop us a DM saying roadmap. We'll send you a link, book into a diary with a broker, and we'll talk about a roadmap session. The second one is they want to do a portfolio review. Got a few properties under your belt. What got you to here? Why don't you get you to that next level of growth? So how do you do things differently? Are we talking trust? Are we talking stripping equity, maybe paying some mortgage insurance, for example, splitting deposits up? Nothing's off the table at that point. It's how do we continue to grow and scale a portfolio responsibly, diligently as well. Nate's the master of cash flow and working that out. So when we're unpacking that, if it's a portfolio review, then drop us a DM saying portfolio review, and we'll gladly help. And I've got no disrespect to your current broker who you've worked with, but I think that people usually say they've run a course with maybe their current team and they're looking to upgrade that as well. And there's no shame in that. Like I said, what got you to here will not get you to there as well. Mm-hmm. And I will preface that by saying we're not perfect. We'll try bloody hard. And this is not me angling or fishing for business. Maybe it's just a question where you go back to your broker going, hey, look, I'm really itchy to go and do something. What do you suggest we do as well? So this is not me angling or dangling the carrot for any type of business. We just want to see investors do well and to really bring a community together. We're calling it, we called it our property powerhouse. I've quickly figured out that term's trademarked. So watch this space to see what it's going to be called.
What will we rename?
rename this little child of ours.
Shout out to the broker that owns the trademark.
I met him.
Apologies.
I met him over in Surge. And I had to apologise because I saw it on his shirt. It was called Powerhouse.
Stand out better.
He come up to you. No, I went up to him. And I said, have you trademarked that word? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm going to apologise in advance. I'll change our name. It was cool. And the reason why I've set this group up is investors struggle to find people they can share their successes with. And what I mean by that is clients that are looking to buy 5, 6, 7 investment properties this year. They want to go to the moon. They can't tell their friends that they've bought properties. They can't tell anyone about the recent acquisitions they've done and their ability to scale a portfolio. So it's almost like this silent success. And it's like, well, hang on, where can we find someone that actually champions and celebrates your wins? This is the place. I don't care if you're trying to buy your first or you're trying to buy your 7th. This is the place where we're trying to breed a community of investors. I'm not talking about a Facebook group. I'm sorry, no disrespect to that, where they just kind of like throw away advice and bits and pieces. I'm talking about where you plug in, you raise your mindset, you raise your standards, you're accountable for what you said you're going to do. So if you said you're going to buy 5 this year, you start to get the ball rolling to buy 5, and then you're around people that will champion and celebrate your success when you hit your goals. And that to me is the essence of the group. I don't care what it's called. I know the outcome that we're looking for. So if that's something that you're interested in, drop us a message, call it community. We'll get onto it and we'll send you the details. And that's due to drop, I think, the 12th of March in the evening, Sydney time. We're going to run it this hasn't been done before, so we're breaking new ground on this.
Yeah.
But what I really feel is, hey, look, we're learning, we're on the journey. We want to bring other people on the journey because, like I say, people will be asking us in 10 years how we did it. In 10 years' time, I probably won't be working. And I'm sorry about that. But to everyone that's on the journey that wants to take action, I'm saying join us now so you can be part of this movement that works because they want to, not because they have to. Yeah. And it's kind of my message to finish up on, because I love everyone that reaches out. When they reach out, I've got to tell you, I still get a kick out of it. I will always get a kick out of it because, like I said, you've given us your time, you've given us your energy. I'm going to meet you halfway and say, you're going to get the best out of us. And let's do some magic together. So, team, thanks very much for joining me. I love it. If you've loved this episode, you're going to pass it on. Just share the link to someone and say, hey, mate, let's go on this journey together and let's make some magic happen as well. That's a wrap. Talk soon.